It's time to be about that life, the startup life. Here's your host, Dominic Lawson.
All right, Startup Nation. So I hope you're ready to receive some value today. My name is Dominic Lawson, and this is the Startup Life, the show for entrepreneurs and career-minded professionals. You know, Startup Nation, sometimes we just have it in our mind that we just know exactly what we want to do on this path of entrepreneurship and really chart the course of our lives. And today's guest knows very much about that, as he graduated from the University of Iowa and 2 days later moved to LA. He is an American film, television producer, and director. He is responsible for many of Netflix's hits, such as two of my favorite projects, The Toys That Made Us and The Movies That Made Us. He is also responsible for many comedy specials, like for the likes of Kevin Hart, Tiffany Haddish, Aziz Ansari, and more, and have worked on many projects on many other platforms that include Disney Plus, the History Channel, Amazon, BET Plus, and more. He is the founder and CEO of Company Dynamics. He is Brian Volk-Weiss, BVW. How's it going, my man?
I'm doing all right, man. How you doing? Thank you for having me on.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And like you said, like I said earlier, man, I'm so gracious for your time today. I know we're recording this the day before Thanksgiving, man. Kind of really quickly before we get into our conversation, really quickly, talking to me about, you know, what you got planned for the next few days. Are you taking a few days off for Thanksgiving? You enjoying the family, or are you going to kind of sneak in some work? Kind of tell me about the next few days.
Well, rumor has it there's some sort of pandemic going on.
Right.
So Thanksgiving we typically have between 30 and 50 people come over.
Gotcha.
And this year we are having, I believe, 4 people come over. So it'll be the family plus 4.
Gotcha.
Instead of the family plus 30 to 50.
Gotcha.
Which,
Yeah.
by the way, I am not complaining about.
Right. Gotcha. No, I definitely understand that for sure. You know, you talked about the pandemic, and I want to kind of tie that into what you do, you know, with your film projects and stuff like that. You know, just kind of talk about how you've had to transition with your, you know, with your, not just like, you know, maybe some projects were moving forward, maybe some projects stopped, or maybe some of the projects that were still going forward maybe had to be altered due to the pandemic. Kind of talk about that, I guess, pivoting, if you will.
Well, to use a word that I've said more in 2020 than the rest of my life combined times a billion million, or a million billion,
Gotcha.
However you want to say it.
Gotcha.
We have been very, 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 very blessed.
Gotcha.
None of our series were postponed or canceled. You know, we were making 3 shows for Netflix this year, a show for Disney Plus, a show for BET Plus, a couple things for Amazon, and we very luckily had nothing canceled. We did have to shift some stuff around, and we had to build some new gear. You know, we built these remote shooting kits so we could keep filming. So that's definitely something we never did before or had before. So, I mean, it really was just about adapting. We evacuated our headquarters really early. Like, we evacuating like the end of February, like around February 27th.
Gotcha.
And I think we were completely out, everybody, by March 13th. And a lot of people thought I was crazy, including me and my wife. But unfortunately, I was not crazy. And I think partially because we evacuated so quickly, we were fully operational before April. And that's part of why we were able to just keep working.
Gotcha. Thank you for sharing that. And you're right. February 27th is pretty early. I know a lot of people start kind of making that transition probably like mid-March and stuff like that. But let me ask you this in that same vein. You know, when you're talking to your family, your wife and stuff like that, but also your team, because I believe you employ about 70 people there in LA. Kind of talk about like that. Well, I guess kind of walk me through that conversation about like, look, team, like this is coming. And even ahead of time, like you said, walk me through that conversation as far as like trying to convince them, like, this is the right thing to do. This is what we're going to do, but we're going to be okay. Kind of walk me through that if you don't mind.
I mean, I'll be honest with you. I was sitting at my son's softball game,
Okay.
and I got a news alert saying that South Korea was shutting its borders and starting to quarantine.
Right.
And I guess I didn't realize this at the moment, but after the fact, I realized I guess I have a lot of respect for the Korean government, because the moment I saw that, I was like, oh yeah, this is coming here.
Right.
Because before that, it was just China and Italy and Iran. And obviously I don't mean any disrespect to any of those countries.
Of course.
But I don't know, man. It was something about South Korea. I was like, okay, this is real. So that night, I got home. I did a deep dive into everything, Google and whatever. And I'm like, listen, if I'm being fully honest with you, like, my grandparents, all of them survived the Holocaust.
Gotcha.
And became very close to getting killed in the camps. And, one of the things I was raised growing up with, my grandfather told me, and his entire family, died in the gas chambers.
Right.
And, he told me, he was like, when I left Austria, people thought I was crazy. And then the Nazis invaded and everybody died. And, what my grandfather taught me, and he told me this over and over and over again until he passed away, was, you can always go back,
Gotcha.
but you can't always leave. So when I saw that South Korea was getting hit, that I just heard my grandfather saying that. And literally that night, and this is one of the benefits of being the CEO and founder.
Right.
I sent an email to the whole company saying, listen, some of you are going to think this is crazy. Some of you are going to be okay with it. And, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm being paranoid, but we are leaving. I want to have everybody out of the building before March 15th. So tell your supervisors what you need to do that, and let's go, because we are leaving. And nobody told me I was crazy until about a month or two later. Everybody was evacuating. And then I had a couple people say to me, man, I finally thought you had lost your mind. But you were right. And thank God we did.
Gotcha.
And that's really, my CFO called me and was like, you sure about this? And I was like, no, I'm not. But like my grandfather said, we can always go back. And,
Right.
One of the reasons why leaving early was so important for our company is, it's not just about people working from home. We had to move a lot of equipment.
Right.
Some of our people that deal with color and sound correction, some of them are working on 800 to 1,000-pound machines that needed flatbed trucks to get them out of, some of these things were never even designed to be moved.
Right.
So it was a very complicated, we had over 80 people, and about 50 of which had editing machines and color correcting and whatever, have to get moved. And I mean, to this minute, our entire company, which for almost 2 decades has functioned in one building in Burbank, we're spread out over 70 miles, in 4 or 5 dozen homes right now. So doing that quickly, and like I said, unfortunately, I was right. It was very meaningful because I know a lot of production companies that did not move quickly, and some of them are out of business temporarily. Some of them are out of business permanently.
Right.
So I give my grandfather pretty much all the credit.
Gotcha. No, I appreciate that. And, it goes back to this theory I have when it comes to, entrepreneurship. And it's kind of like, it's not that necessarily you can tell the future, but if you pay attention to what's happening around you, you can kind of predict what's going to happen next. And it seems like you have that, man. So I appreciate you sharing that story.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always reading. I'm a big reader, books, internet, whatever. And to me, it's all about patterns. And
exactly.
Nobody can predict the future, but if you pay attention to the patterns of the past, it's the closest you can come without having a time machine to being able to do that.
For sure. Thank you for sharing that. Once again, Startup Nation, we're talking to Brian Volk-Weiss, founder and CEO of Comedy Dynamics. I wanted to ask you this because we said at the top of the show, one of my favorites that you've done is the toys that made us and the movies that made us, especially the toys that made us. Man, you really took me and my wife down memory lane with that one. I want to ask you this because I know you have about a lot of toys in your office, about 2,000 plus of them. When you're pursuing a passion project like that one, how do you kind of, I guess, differentiate between the passion part, but actually telling the story behind those brands and those companies? Kind of walk me through that because I think that's important.
Well, I mean, you just have to be ruthless about doing what's best for the audience.
Right.
And I mean, I'll give you a great example.
Sure.
I mean, I'm not a He-Man fan.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a Barbie fan.
Gotcha.
I'm not a Hello Kitty fan. I'm not a Power Rangers fan.
Okay.
I'm not a wrestling fan. So of the 12 episodes we've made so far, I think at least 4 or 5 of them are not toys that when the show was greenlit, I collected.
Mm-hmm.
Now I collect them.
Gotcha.
But back in the day when it was greenlit, I really didn't want to do He-Man. I was like so dead set against He-Man. I didn't get He-Man. Like, I knew I had to do Barbie, and I was okay with it.
Of course.
And I did Hello Kitty for my wife.
Gotcha.
But He-Man, I really didn't want to do.
Really?
And I just wasn't a fan. I never understood it. And basically, all of the research that our research department came up with, and they were like, dude, you should really take another look at He-Man. Like, I'm not sure why you're so against this.
Gotcha.
So, I hired people that I trusted. So when they said that to me, I listened to them. And B, I read what they had provided me, and they were right. So I just did what I thought the audience would want. Listen, I cheated a couple times. I made the Star Trek episode for me.
Gotcha.
We probably should have done Power Rangers in season 1 instead of Star Trek. But I did that one for myself.
Gotcha.
But yeah, like I said, my job is the way I look at my job is to entertain the audience, to either make them laugh or cry, but to give them an emotional response if they are, generously giving me their time.
For sure.
So, I heard a great quote once, Sam Raimi, when he booked Spider-Man.
Mm-hmm.
He said, he was like, listen, I'm making Spider-Man. I'm not making Sam Raimi's Spider-Man. And I took that to heart. Right. And that's how I try to produce and direct, where I pick things that I care about, but I'm making a show for the audience, and I want them to enjoy it and feel like I rewarded their time with value. So that means I cannot always do what I want.
All right, Startup Nation, so we're going to go ahead and take a quick break. We got to pay some bills. Once again, my name is Dominic Lawson, and you're listening to The Startup Life. Tresta powers this episode of The Startup Life. Okay, Startup Nation, I want to talk to you about our sponsor, Tresta. Tresta is an app for iPhone and Android that lets you do business calling and texting from anywhere. I know so many entrepreneurs that are still using their personal phone number for business calls. It can get complicated drawing the line between your personal and professional life. Startup Nation, this is the best business phone app out there. Whether you just need a business phone number or if your team is ready for a complete business phone system, Tresta is totally flexible and can grow with your business. And it's all unlimited calling, texting, and all of the powerful call management features like auto attendance, call recording, user groups, and more for just $15 per user per month. With Tresta, there's no contract, and you don't need any special hardware, just your smartphone you're already using. Tresta is easy to configure, so you can set everything up yourself, all online, avoiding all the hassle and high overhead costs of setting up a traditional business phone system, which is important because as entrepreneurs, we are always trying to cut cost and time. They're offering a 30-day free trial so you can see if Tresta's virtual phone system is right for you. Communicate smarter and more efficiently with Tresta. Start now at Tresta.com/startuplife. That's TRESTA.com/startuplife. The link is there in the show notes if you're listening on the podcast. Tresta, business communication simplified. All right, Startup Nation, welcome back as we continue our conversation with today's guest here on The Startup Life. For sure. No, I appreciate that because we have a lot of times where entrepreneurs are, they're so caught up into what they want, but they kind of miss the, not be as ruthless as to what the target audience or what the audience wants and stuff like that. So I definitely appreciate that, Brian, for sure. I wanted to ask you.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
It's the truth.
Absolutely. No, I appreciate that. And in that same vein, I want to ask you this because we have a lot of people out there who want to, create content and stuff like that. And they want to be on like a platform like a Disney Plus and a Netflix, something that you have been doing pretty successful for a while now. I guess I'm curious about, how does not only does a project come together, but also how does that pitch? What does that pitch to Netflix? What does that pitch to Disney Plus sound like where you're trying to, push an idea to them?
Well, first of all, every single project comes together differently. For sure. I mean, there is no common way any of the shows that I've sold have come together. Gotcha. Every single story is different. So that's the first answer.
Gotcha.
The second answer is, the thing they all have in common is we either make a deck or a tape, and then we set up a meeting and we basically pitch the show, and then we go through the deck and or show them the tape, and if they like it, they buy it, and if they don't, they don't. Gotcha.
Are there ever any ones where you really wanted to get it greenlit and they're just like, nah, we're not doing this one? Has that ever happened before? And then how did you take it?
It happens, and this is not an exaggeration.
Gotcha.
It happens about 99% of the time.
Okay.
So it obviously doesn't bother me too much. Otherwise, I would have committed suicide.
Gotcha.
20 years ago. But here's the truth of the matter,
sure,
as I see it. Just because people pass, that doesn't mean it's dead. Toys That Made Us took me 7 years to sell.
Wow.
I pitched it every year, came very close at History Channel, very close at Nat Geo, and, at the last minute, it didn't happen. And, it was a very random series of events at Netflix that allowed it to happen. Gotcha. So what I basically learned from that is as long as I don't give up, it's going to sell.
Gotcha.
It's just a matter of how long.
Gotcha. So it took 7 years for the Toys That Made Us. Because I tell you, it took me less than 7 minutes to when I saw it to hit play on it. So that's crazy.
I love that.
I appreciate that. And so I want to ask you this because, like I said, you've worked with many people, Kevin Hart, Ali Wong, Jim McGaffigan. You're working on a new project with The Rock and his production company and stuff like that. I'm curious about all of those peoples, like what's that common denominator as far as like just being successful? Is it the same thing like you were saying as far as like just never giving up, or what is something that you've seen across the board when it comes to working with those people where it's like, man, they just have it? What is that?
It's a mixture of two things, and everybody has a different, well, I guess it's three things.
Gotcha.
It's talent, work ethic, and luck. If you remove luck from the equation, which you really shouldn't, but let's just for the sake of argument, let's remove luck.
Gotcha.
It really comes down to a mixture of talent and hard work. There are some people that are 99% talent and 1% hard work. And then there's people that are 1% talent, 99% hard work. And then everybody else is in the middle. So, but that's the main thing is hard work and talent.
Got you. No, I appreciate that. And, you know, and speaking of another project really quickly before we kind of transition, I know you did with the History Channel, you did Grant, which kind of premiered during Memorial Day and stuff like that. And during these crazy times with the pandemic and stuff like that, I am like you, I am a big fan of American history and war history and stuff like that. So I've been listening to a lot of podcasts that just kind of dive into, you know, how these significant leaders, whether it be Franklin Roosevelt or Grant or Winston Churchill, and how they dealt with just adverse situations, just like how we dealing with the pandemic. You know, when it comes to those leaders and how you run your company, what are some of those tenets? I know you talked about your grandfather earlier, but what are some of those tenets from those leaders that we have come to know through the history books that you have kind of taken to heart and implemented in how you run your company?
I mean, if you look at all the people that I look up to, you know, my kids are named after presidents.
Okay.
You know, Washington, Grant, and Lincoln, and
Gotcha.
Truman.
Gotcha.
If you look at all the people that I look up to and respect, these are all people that they came from nothing. They dealt with staggering amounts of failure their entire lives.
Right.
They never gave up, and they eventually prevailed. So that's what pretty much everybody I look up to has in common. But, you know, it's the thing about, and like I said, I read a lot, and I read a lot about historical figures. Mm-hmm. The ones that people write books about, the thing that I have found very interesting is they're usually very normal, if not even leaning towards boring people. Like President Grant was like, he was famous for being like the guy who disappeared in a room.
Right.
Like everybody would always say, if there were 10 people in a room, you'd remember 9, but you'd never remember Grant. But what mattered with Grant was, when every other general didn't know how to fight the Confederacy,
right,
he knew. And the thing that's interesting is everybody kind of knew what to do. But like Grant was the only one who had the courage to do it, which was fight. You know, everybody, all the other Northern generals were just so afraid of the body count. They just kind of let the North, they just kind of let the South get away with it.
Right.
So, and Washington is the same with the British. Washington, what everyone forgets about Washington, the guy won the first battle and then kind of lost every single other battle.
Right.
6 years.
Right.
He was famous for retreating. Like he was like literally like his superpower was his ability to effectively retreat.
Right.
But then he won the war.
Right.
And he beat the most powerful government on the planet at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, and again, I'm not doing anything close to what any of these people I look up to did.
Right.
But what I've learned from them is you gotta have confidence. It really comes down to confidence. And I make 1 million decisions a year. I mean, maybe not 1 million, but let's say I make 1,000 decisions a year.
Gotcha.
I would say I have the factual data necessary to make, at the most, 30% of those decisions.
Gotcha.
So what that means is 70% of the time, to some degree, I'm flying blind. And I've just made peace with that. And I've always been okay with that. So it's like, I never get interviewed about all my failures. But the funny thing is, I have, for every success I've had, conservatively, 30 to 40 failures.
Wow.
And to me, like I said, going back to your question, like that's what I've learned from all these books. It's, you can fail and fail and fail and fail. And as long as you keep getting up and you don't get demoralized or have a nervous breakdown, fuck it, you can even have a nervous breakdown. But as long as you recover from your nervous breakdown and keep fighting, you'll be okay and you'll prevail.
I hear that. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And I know a lot of people in Startup Nation appreciate that as well. Once again, Startup Nation, we're actually wrapping up with, give me just a second. Brian Volk-Weiss, founder and CEO of Company Dynamics. And if you want to check out everything that he's been like, he's done a lot of stuff, Startup Nation. We have a few of those links there in the show notes for easy access, and also a website to his company there in the show notes as well. Look, man, we're in the holiday season. It's a question that comes up all the time. I gotta ask you, because you're in the Hollywood space and stuff like that. I gotta ask you this: Die Hard, man, is it a Christmas movie or not?
Listen, yes, it's a Christmas movie.
Thank you.
I understand why people say it's not. I mean, it's not about Christmas.
Right.
It takes place on New Year's Eve. Doesn't take place on Christmas. But yeah, that's a Christmas movie in my book.
Gotcha. It's funny because I think it is too. And people say, no, it's not like Home Alone or anything like that. And I always make the argument, Home Alone is basically Kid Die Hard. It's literally like the same thing when you think about
absolutely.
it. Right. So
absolutely. I've said that for almost since I saw the movie the first time.
Right.
It is absolutely Die Hard.
Right, for sure. Appreciate you sharing that. Well, look, man, before I ask the last question, I just want to say thank you so much for your time and kind of sharing all your value and stuff like that. I would definitely want to, get you back to your family for the holidays and stuff like that. But if you would, good sir, could you just give us some words of encouragement to take us out for today, if you don't mind, as many people kind of dive through this pandemic and also kind of move forward on their path to entrepreneurship?
I mean, here's the thing. I learned this when I was in high school. I'm very blessed that I learned this at such a young age. One of my teachers told me, there's nothing new under the sun. And that may sound like a little depressing. Like, what do you mean there's nothing new under the sun? Like, there's airplanes now. There wasn't airplanes 200 years ago. And that's true. Like, you could, of course, argue there are new things under the sun. But the reason why I bring it up, and the reason why I've always taken inspiration from that statement, is no matter what you're dealing with, personally, professionally, globally, whatever, to some degree, it's already happened. And I always take deep strength from that because, I'll give you a great example. If you want to feel really good about COVID, if you want to seriously have a pick-me-up and be like, wow, COVID ain't bad at all, read a book about the Spanish flu. Because as bad as COVID may seem, Spanish flu, which was only 102 years ago, Spanish flu was like a million billion times worse. In every single way you could think of,
right,
was worse. So I feel like some people, and I'm guilty of this too, every now and then you're looking out the window and you're kind of depressed that you're not going to movie theaters, you're not going to bars and clubs and, whatever. And it might be easy to get depressed about that and be like, I'm so unlucky. Oh my God. What a terrible life I'm having. I'm stuck in the house in 2020 and this is terrible. But then you read about the Spanish flu, and you're like, you know what? At least we know what germs are. At least we know how to get COVID. At least we know if you get COVID, there's a 99% chance you'll live. Like, so I just think it's so important that being an entrepreneur, owning a small business is very, very hard, and it's very stressful. If you get down for more than a day or two about what's on your shoulders, that could destroy your business. That could destroy your life. That could destroy your marriage. That could destroy your family. But if you have the ability to realize that everything around you is going wrong, and some of it's your fault, some of it is not your fault, it's just bad luck, you get up and you fight. And the only way to get, that I'm aware of, the only way to get through the dark days or the dark weeks or the dark years. I mean, my 2013 was horrible. I'm still shaken up from my 2013. That was almost 8 years ago. But I didn't go down. And to be honest with you, the only thing that kept me going was that I decided to keep going. I just didn't go down. Everything else was wrong and bad, terrible luck, self-inflicted. I did some really dumb stuff, but I just didn't go down. And I didn't, I would get depressed for a couple hours or a couple days here and there, but I would always nip it in the bud, get up in the morning and keep fighting. And the way I looked at it was, I would be like, okay, for every 100 phone calls I'm having, 98 are bad, 2 are good. Next week, I'm going to get to the point where 97 are bad and 3 are good. And then the week after that, maybe it'll be 90 bad and 10 are good. And you just have to compartmentalize big bad things into little positive steps forward. And that's how you get out of the dark days. Or at least that's how I've always done it.
Gotcha. No, I think that's very sound advice. Thank you so much, Brian. And that's going to wrap up this session of The Startup Life. Once again, we want to thank Brian Volk-Weiss, founder and CEO of Comedy Dynamics, for coming on the show. Thank you so much, Brian.
Thank you, man. Have a great Thanksgiving, and I appreciate your interest.
No worries. And as always, Startup Nation, if you have an idea, be about that life, The Startup Life. If you want to let us know what you think about our show, have an idea for a show topic, or would like to advertise on our show, send us a message on the Startup Life Podcast Facebook page. And while you are there, like and follow our page as well. It's a great way for us to engage with you, Startup Nation, and really grow our community. The link is there in the show notes. Subscribe to the show as it can be heard on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher Radio, Spotify, or even on your Facebook timeline or any other platform you like to get your podcast. If you are listening on Apple Podcasts and you find our content valuable, please give us a 5-star rating, as it will help us climb the charts and help more people find our show. You can also listen to the show on the Startup Life Podcast new website. There you will find the all-new startup blog where I write on many topics that are interesting and helpful to you on your path to entrepreneurship. And hey, if you have an idea, be about that life, the startup life.